This topic has been on my list of videos I want to make for years now, and since I haven't made a video in months and months, I figure it's as good as any to start up again with, so welcome to my underwhelming comeback. My name's Alex, and today we're going to be talking about bisexuality versus pansexuality, starting with a few definitions. Bisexuality is commonly known as attraction to both men and women, attraction to two or more genders, or attraction to same and different genders. Pansexuality is known as attraction to any or all genders, or attraction regardless of gender. So, are these the same thing? The short answer is no. Yes, there can be a lot of room for overlap, and depending on the particular individual and the way they feel, in practice they may mean the same thing, however they are not identical. While bi and pan can be synonyms, they're not always. For example, based on the aforementioned definitions, bisexuality could be used to describe attraction to multiple genders but not all. For example, everyone except cis men. And pansexuality might be used to describe an orientation where gender is simply not a factor in attraction, whereas bisexuals still notice it or at least take it into account. So why would you use one label over the other? Well, I'm pretty sure bisexuality as a word has been around for longer, which means some people might have more of a personal connection to it, and since it's more popular, more people are likely to understand what it means when you say it. Pansexuality is less well known, but has more connotation with knowledge and acceptance of gender diversity and spectrums, and is considered more expressly inclusive of trans and non-binary people when describing those one might be attracted to. Pansexuality also conveys less emphasis on gender as a factor of attraction, and is subject to less negative stereotyping when it comes to assumptions of things like promiscuity. Ultimately, one might pick one of these labels over the other because they simply feel it represents them best. So, the discourse. Talking point 1. Bisexuality is supposedly transphobic because attraction to men and women doesn't acknowledge or include trans people. Well, I can't speak for anyone else, but when I talk about men and women, that includes trans men and trans women. Although yes, that means that non-binary and potentially intersex people are disregarded here. However, attraction to men and women, or both genders, aren't the only definitions of bisexuality, as outlined before. Are some bisexual people transphobic, with a lot of learning and growth to do when it comes to matters of gender and sex? Of course, but so are people of every orientation, just because some people are transphobic and that is the shitty reality we live in. It doesn't make sense to throw everyone using the label bisexual under the transphobia bus, especially when some bisexual people are trans and non-binary themselves. Although yes, internalized transphobia is a thing, but that's a topic for another time. Talking point 2. Pansexual people are supposedly biphobic because they're using pansexual as a word to describe the exact same thing as bisexual just to avoid calling themselves bi. Therefore, pansexual people are contributing to bisexual erasure. One of the underlying questions surrounding this argument is it problematic to not want to be called something because of the stigma attached to it? In the case of bisexuality, is this just internalized biphobia? Honestly, I don't know. I don't have all the answers, and I haven't given this specific matter enough thought to have a concrete standpoint on it. I can see how, in theory, it would be possible, but surely being out as pansexual has its own stigma and struggles too, and what about people that use both? What about people that feel that pansexuality describes something distinctly different to bisexuality? I've already outlined a few different definitions for each orientation and reasons why people might align themselves with one identity over the other, and those reasons are valid. Why can't bi and pan people embrace their similarities and differences, unite and advocate for each other? That's what I'm trying to advocate, and bottom line is you can't force a label onto someone that doesn't want it. Point number 3. Hearts, not parts. Popular among pansexuals, this slogan emphasises the lack of focus on gender and instead highlights that for many pansexuals it's personality that drives attraction. However, this rhetoric is sometimes criticised for implying that if pansexuals are so focused on hearts, that means other people are only focused on parts. 1, this is a little transphobic and reductionist, as someone's parts aren't what make them a man or a woman or other in the first place. And 2, obviously people of any orientation do usually still concern themselves with hearts too. That being said, I have seen this I fall in love with the person, not what's in their pants sentiment among bisexuals as well, and I'm honestly just not a fan of it in general because doesn't everyone fall in love with the person, apart from aromantics? I understand that it's meant to convey that one's not fussed about physical sex in a partner, but I just don't think the phrase lands very well. If you're falling in love with what's in someone's pants, that's either just lust, genital fixation or fetishization, or some really nice underwear. Of course, a staple of any discourse around bi and pansexuality is they're the same thing, but we've already covered that. So, my personal thoughts and conclusions. Well, for me, I usually use bi as my main label because ultimately gender does play some kind of factor in attraction for me. However, I will sometimes say bi/pan because there is no gender that I am explicitly not attracted to. I could fancy anyone, and yes, while pansexual could describe that, I knew and identified with the word bisexual first, and I feel like it's more me. It's more integral to my personal journey with sexuality, and I like that it's more well known and I don't have to explain what it means every time I use it. I am more likely to use bi/pan as a descriptor for myself in circles of people that are already much more likely to know what pan means. However, even then, it's only to be expressly inclusive of non-binary people because, like I said, I don't feel attraction regardless of gender. Gender does have a role. A role that I begrudgingly acknowledge because I am very critical of gender as a concept. So you might argue that it's gender expression that plays a role for me, however I know that the way someone regards themselves will affect how I regard them, and that's the simplest way of explaining it. At the end of the day, I respect if someone chooses one label over the other, and I don't think there's too much point getting hung up on how someone else describes themselves if that label is an accurate representation of their experience. So what do you think? Let me know in a comment, especially if you're bi or pan yourself. What do you think of the aforementioned talking points, and which definitions do you use? Do you know of any other common definitions of either orientation that I didn't include? If you knew relatively little about these orientations and their similarities and differences before, I hope this video helped. I'm going to try and make more like it in the future, so maybe subscribe and stick around for that if you like, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Bye. And 2, obviously people of any orientation do usually still concern themselves with hearts too. I did air quotes wrong. What is that? Like, if you are falling in love with what's in someone's pants, that's either just lust, genital fixation or fetishization.